All right. It is time to get started. So welcome to CloudEight, and of course to my session, Private Channels, the How and When Guide. Some takeaways you will have after these sessions are, of course, I will talk about private channels and what they are and how they how they can be used, some use cases about them. And I will go on talking about some actual facts and limitations as well as how, from an end user's perspective, how to manage them, administer them, and of course, create and use them, as well as some considerations from an IT perspective regarding security and compliance as well. And also how you can administer this private channels as an IT administrator as well. My name is Adam Daltinger. I'm a senior IT consultant from Sweden working at ITEA. Also on Microsoft MVP, mostly focusing on Microsoft Teams and surrounding productivity services within Microsoft 365. Feel free to connect with me, whether it's on LinkedIn or Twitter or both. If you have any questions after the sessions or just want to connect, feel free to do so. Before we move on with the session, I just want to say thank you to this event sponsors, 365, Script Runner, and IT Point for making this event possible. So thank you. All right, so let's get started here. I mean, when Microsoft Teams was released a few years back, Microsoft had this idea of simplicity. In that sense that we came from file server structures with a lot of levels of permissions, subfolders after subfolders, and every subfolder had a different kind of permission levels, as well as SharePoint Server, where we used to work a lot with subsites as well, with different permissions. And Microsoft wanted to make it easy for users, saying, okay, we have a team, it's based on a group in the backend. And if you're a member of this group or team, you have access to everything, right? It's one level here, one level of permissions. Either you don't have access to this group, you have access to nothing within this team, or you have access or you're a member of this team. Hence, you have access to everything, right? It doesn't really matter if you're an owner or member in that sense, because both have kind of read right to all the content, or you can see all the conversations, you can see and access all the files and apps and so forth. It didn't take long until the request for an additional layer of permission was one of the biggest requests on the user base of Microsoft Teams, and Microsoft had to do something about this and make the users happy. So they worked for a great while and for a solution, and they come up with this private channels, right? And private channels aren't new. They've been around for, I think, 1.5 years or something like that. And what's special about this is that before private channels, we had to kind of work around this, right? And how people did this was you had a team and suddenly you needed some kind of users. Maybe let's say you're working with a project, right? So we create a team, we're all internal members, and suddenly you want to work with the customer in this project. And since you started working with this team and had all this internal stuff in it, you don't want to invite the customer to this team, right? Because there's sensitive content. So what you do is create an additional team here with a subset of members or all the members from this project, internal members, and then add, the customer as a guest to this team. So we have two teams, like one internal and one external. Obviously, both are, living in your own internal organization, right? But you kind of like to make it easy. One internal, one external. In the external you have guests, and this is still applicable today, actually. And I will talk about that even when we have private channels. So, what is private channels then? in one sentence here, it is channels. It's a channel, and it's a type of channel within a team with its own level of permissions, where you add members to this channel itself, creating a private space for a subset of users within this team. And of course, I will go into this a little bit more in detail. So why use private channels? There's a few use cases, obviously. I mean, to start with, I'm always talking about this project. For example, keep things internal. You don't want anyone else to see what's in this channel, and to keep some sensitive content apart from other members. I mean, you can imagine a series of use cases here. For example, you have an organizational team, and there are all your coworkers in these teams as members, and then there are some managers as well, and they want their own private space. So instead of creating, as in previous slide, create an additional team for this, they can now create a private channel where they have, sensitive conversations or sensitive files or other content. And as I said, like in the previous example, also like the project, we can have project managers in these private channels and so forth. So there's an additional I just want to mention, that is the group chat, because you can say, like, there's a few members in a team, they want their own kind of private space. They can start a group chat, right? So that absolutely works, but there's a few caveats with a group chat. For example, when you share files, you are using OneDrive for Business for this. So the person that shares a file in the group chat, they still have the ownership of this file, and they just share this file to the other members of the chat from their OneDrive, basically. And this could be a hassle when you start sharing files back and forth, and who owns the files, and someone deletes the files or leave the organizations, and all the other members dependent on this file can no longer reach it. So it could be like this risk of a spider net back and forth. Another one is, for example, you don't have threaded conversations in team chat overall, and that also includes group chats. And there's also obviously limitations to content you can add to a chat as well. If you compare that to a team and a channel where you can add a lot of different kind of tabs. There's some limitations for that for private channels as well, which I will talk about in a minute. So, for example, here, if you look at the right image here, this is kind of the example I was talking about. You have let's say you have a project team, and now we create, and you can see that here as well. If you look at the little icon here, that means it's a private channel, it's a lock. And what you can do here is add members to this manager. All the managers you can add to this private channel. But a big limitation here, which kind of like ruins it in some cases, is that in order to be a member of this manager's private channel, you need to be a member of the team, like the parent team. And with parent team, I mean the team where this private channel are created in, right? So you have to be a member there. And as you can see in the text here also, it says PC. So that stands for private channel, simply. Okay, so you know that as well. So you have to be a member of the parent team, right? So you can't really just let's go back to the example once again with a project team. Let's say we created a team with standard channels because we didn't think it through really. What's happening in the future. So we started, putting sensitive content there, and suddenly we say, okay, we need to invite this customer to collaborate about this project. So what can we do? I mean, we can create a private channel, but yeah, we can do that now. But does that really help? Because we have sensitive content in all the other standard channels and in the general channel and so forth. So we can't convert channels either. That's also a limitation. You can't turn a standard channel into a private channel, and vice versa, a private channel into a standard channel. So that means in order for them to be a member of a private channel at all, they need to be invited to the team. Hence, they get access to all the standard channels, right, where the sensitive content lives. So yes, sure, you can move files pretty easily between standard channels and private channels or whatever. Like moving files in Teams are not hard, but conversations, they're much harder to move, and you might have other apps and content and tabs as well. So it's just easier to actually use the scenario I was talking about in the beginning, where you create an additional, this external team, right? So that's still applicable because you can't really go around this. So an idea is to, moving forward and knowing this will be a team where we will have, for example, external people, guests. It doesn't have to be guests. It could be other people that you're inviting later, or there is members today that you want to restrict access to certain things in this teams from. So what you can do is kind of think the other way around. Okay, well, let's create a team and create the channels directly as private channels the first time you create them, right? So in that way, you can kind of invite people to the team, and they can't really see anything unless they're a member of all these private channels. Obviously, the general channel, that's, you can't do much about that. It's automatically created. You can't change the name. You can't remove it. You can't convert the channel, obviously. So you kind of can maybe have like general information that everyone can access, and then maybe have this private channel where all the internal members are, and create another channel for other members that we want to restrict access for others to see, or just add an external guest, like the guest to this private channel, or just let them use the general channel for conversations and collaboration with the customer. So I have to kind of think the other way around here, how you set this up. You have to think it through, because it would be great to just create a private channel and invite the guest only to that channel and not the parent team. Sadly, that doesn't work. Although there is one, if you attended Microsoft Ignite or read some news about that, Microsoft announced something called Teams Connect. And Teams Connect, also called shared channels, will basically help you out in this scenario, and will be used instead of private channels when it's released, because you can share a channel to a user or to another team, both internally and externally. So that basically do exactly that, kind of like channel only members, but they're basically put into another team, and you don't have to switch tenants or something like that. That channel you share to another team will end up in their team that you shared it to, directly in their tenant. So it's a really great feature. Unfortunately, it's just been postponed till autumn, and you never know if it's going to be further postponed as well. And if it's not here, if it was, I would probably be talking a lot about that instead, but it's not. So we have to go what we had, and that is private channels, which is still great though. All right, so about some facts and limitations to private channels. First of all, you can only have 30 private channels per team. So, and that goes on top of the 200 standard channel limit. So in total, you can have 200 standard channels, and on top of that, 30 private channels. And another limitation here is the members. You can only have today 250 members per private channel. So, I mean, you don't need a separate teams in some scenarios. You have to think it, especially if you think it through, you could really, get rid of a lot of teams in this way. And it works like normal channels, like standard channels. You have a conversations tab, you have a files tab where you can have files, and you can also add tabs and some applications there as well. And I mean, they're pretty easy to create. I mean, they're as easy to create as a standard channel, and they're pretty easy to maintain, except from like there's an additional layer for permission. So kind of works like a team. A private channel has owner and it has members, right? And I will show you this later as well. And as I also mentioned, apps and connectors are available, but they must be added to the parent team first before they can be added to the private channel. As I was already mentioning, the kind of sad limitation that in order to be a member of a private channel, or owner or member of a private channel, you need to be part of the team first, where you're creating it. And message extensions are not supported, as well as some apps, unfortunately, like Planner and forms. So won't be accessible. You can get around this in one way, kind of like a workaround. That is that if you have a planner, for example, in the team that you want to add as a tab in the private channel, obviously you can't click the add tab button and add planner because it's not there, but you can add a website tab and go to the planner in the team and get the URL for that plan, and then add in the private channel, add a website tab and paste that URL there, and it will be it's a pretty good experience, but it's not always working on browser client of Teams. But if you're using the desktop version, it works pretty well to do it this way. You could also obviously create a new planner in some other standard channel, and then take the URL for that and use that specific planner in that private channel as a website tab. Obviously, if you create it in the team, other members can access this if they get a hold of this plan or this URL, because it's created in a team's perspective. Email notifications for missed activity and stuff like that are not supported as well in the private channels. And I also already mentioned you can convert a private channel or a standard channel to a private channel and vice versa. And except from that, there are some additional considerations regarding security and compliance, which I will cover a little bit later. So let's move on here. What's really good though is that when you create a private channel and basically if you're not a member of this private channel, you won't see it. Okay, you won't see it in your left hand Teams rail. It will be invisible there until someone adds you as an owner or member. It will then pop up. So it's not like people will like, oh, there's a secret channel over there, but I can't access this. Why am I excluded from that? I'm not like in the cool gang or something like that. So you won't see it. And team owners, really, they won't even see that private channel as well. Even if you're owner of the parent team where the private channel exists, you can't see it and you can't access any of the content. You won't see it in the left-hand rail among the other channels of the team, but as a team owner, you can go into the team settings, go to the channels tab, and from there you can see the existence of these private channels and the ones that are owners of those private channels. That's what you can see. You can't like access any content of the channels themselves. You also have, as a team owner, have the possibility, you have the permissions to basically delete any channel in the team, and that also includes the private channels. If you feel like doing that, you can do it. And obviously, you can also restore them. So we're going to go into the kind of the end user experience here. And when we talk about end user, we also talk about the availability to create the permission to actually create private channels. So you can do the kind of two ways, in two levels, so to speak. So first of all, it's whether it's enabled or disabled on a kind of a tenant level. Actually, it's a policy level. So I will show you also later in the Teams admin center how to do this, but basically either it's you create a policy or you use the global one that hits everyone, that doesn't have any other specific policy. But you can create different policies if you want some people to be able to create private channels, or you don't want anyone to do it, or everyone to be able to create private channels. So let's say here at the left here, we turn this on for everyone. So everyone in this organization can now create private channels, right? Yes, but by default, yes. But any team owner can decide for their own team they are an owner of if they want the members of that team to be able to create private channels in that team. So if a team owner wants, like, they don't want a lot of private channels which they can access if they're not a member of it, so they kind of want to restrict this. They can go into the team settings in this particular team they're an owner of and disable the creation of private channels for the members of the team. So let's say everyone, you can now you have permissions to create a private channel as a member. So the process goes like this: that a user creates a private channel just as any other standard channel, but you put it as a private channel. I will show you in a bit as well. When you create a private channel, the person that creates the private channel becomes the owner of this private channel. And just as when you create a team, it's the same procedure basically. So yeah, I become the owner because I created it, and I also have the possibility to straight up add other owners. I want to be owners of this channel, and as well, and members as well. And I mean, members of owners of a private channel have some, some further settings as well. They can do, for example, can the members of this private channel edit their messages, delete their messages, add tabs and stuff like that. And also the owner can manage some apps and stuff like that as well, just as like a team owner for the team. And remember, in order to add applications or apps to private channels, they need to be added to the parent team first as well. Any user, just as in a team, they can choose to leave a private channel if they no longer wants to be a member of it. But if you're an owner and you're the only owner, you can't do that. It will tell you to, okay, you need to promote someone else, a member of this private channel, to an owner, and then you can leave it, because it won't let you leave the private channel ownerless, basically. But this can happen in other ways. So, for example, if this only owner from in a private channel, they are removed from the parent team, like the group the team belongs to, or leave the organization, they quit their job, and their user account is removed. Obviously, they will also be removed from the private channel. What happens then is automatically, and a random member of this private channel will be automatically promoted to an owner of this private channel. Okay. So I'm just going to show you real quick here some user experience. Remove that, and we go in here. And this nicely refresh. Don't we just love this? Let's just do this quickly here. I just did this before the session. I need to adjust some settings here, I think. So we're in Teams here now. I'm logged in as a user, in this case myself. And you can see here I have a team. And in this team, there are a private channel in here. You can see that by the little padlock here as well. And if I go into the team settings here, so CloudEight team, press the three dots over here and go to manage team, and I go to settings, member permissions. I can see here I have an option as a team owner to basically allow or disallow members to create private channels. By default, it's on, but you have the possibility to disable this if you want to. Okay. And if I go to the private channel here, I can click on the ellipses here as well, the three dots, and I can now choose manage channel. And you can see here now we have this channel has its own like members portal where you can see the owners and the members and guests of this private channel. And guests are obviously they're also supported to be added as members in this private channel. So you can also have add additional members here. So let's add a friend of mine if he's there. All right, and add Emma in this case. Let's add Emma, and here, just as with when you add members to a team, you can choose to is Emma going to be a member or an owner? Let's make her a member. All right, so let's switch over to another user here, and this is actually Emma. And you will see that she soon gets access to this channel. And let's create a private channel, right? Emma is going to create a private channel. So what's happening is that you go to the ellipsis of the team, and then from there, press add channel. And this is a normal procedure. Let's call this hidden channel. And under privacy here, this is where you set the type of channel you want. So we want this to be a private channel. So let's click private here. All right, that's all we need to do. Click next. Normally in a standard channel, it's the channels gets created, but since this is private channel, we also have the possibility to add further owners or members. So let's don't add anyone to this. Let's press skip here. And here you can see, I can now see, since I became a member, my other user added Emma to this manager's private channels. It wasn't there a second ago. Now it's there because I can now see it because I'm a member of this. I can also obviously see this hidden channel I just created, and I will automatically be an owner of this channel. So if I click here, I can see here, I have a post tab here as normal. I have a files tab as well. If I click new conversation here, you can see I told you about a limitation that you don't have message extensions in a private channel. So if I go over to the general channel here, for example, and click new conversation, you see I have some extensions here that are not available from this private channel. Also, if I click add tab here, you can see there's a few to choose from and stuff like that. But if I, for example, try to find planner or go over tasks, you can see there's no option to add a planner or, for example, forms or anything. So unfortunately, there's some limitations there. Microsoft still states that like it's coming, but I haven't heard anything for a while there. But I really hope that will be supported eventually. So there's you can see some limitations there as well. Okay, so as I told you, you can go into manage channel, you can add members and stuff like that directly to this private channel. And this is how it works basically. You use it as a normal channel. Only if you're a member or an owner for this channel, you can actually see it. And obviously there's some limitations to it, but otherwise from that, it's like any other channel in a team, at least from a end user perspective. It works a little bit differently in the back end, which I will come to in a bit. Another thing I just want to mention is here that if you, for example, go to the general channel and click and check up in the right corner here, you can see there's a meet button. Basically, you can do an ad hoc meeting, but there's also a little button here, so you can actually schedule a meeting. Since private channels works a bit differently in the back end, they are basically not part of this group that the team is like based on. So that means this group, when that gets provisioned, when the team gets provisioned, that also provisions Outlook mailbox, a group mailbox, right? And that's where basically all channel meetings gets created in. So since private channels are not part of this group, there's no mailbox, group mailbox, they're not part of that. So you can't schedule meetings in a private channel. So we go back to the hidden channel we have here. You only have the option to start an ad hoc meeting. That works fine, right? But you can't schedule any meeting. All right, so let's get back here. Let's change this back. This. All right. So we talked about what they are and what you can do with them and a little bit how they work. It's nothing really advanced in that sense. You created it like any other channel, and you just add additional owners and members to this channel. But when it comes to how it works in the back end, it's a little bit differently, and especially if you're an IT administrator or something like that, using retention policies and so forth. It's important to have knowledge about how this works in the back end. And a normal team, what you see here, this is basically a normal team being created. And as I said, like it's based on a Microsoft 365 group in the back end, and that Microsoft 365 group provision a few different workloads automatically. I was speaking about the group mailbox, for example, in Outlook, but also a team site in SharePoint gets provisioned with a default library. And this library is being used to store the files of the team. The team service itself doesn't store any files. They're all stored in SharePoint in this corresponding team site. So that's got provision when you create a team, and obviously, and when you create channels in the team, a corresponding folder with the same name gets provisioned in the root of this document library with the same name, and they are kind of connected. So we go into the files tab of the general channel, as you can see here. You will end up in this folder in SharePoint called General. This is how it works. But when you create a private channel, it works a little bit differently. You can see here, we have our normal team, and then we go about and create a private channel. So we do this, and what you can see from this image here is that it actually creates an additional team site with its own document library. It's not just a different library in the team site, it's a whole different site collection, actually. And that site collection, or that team site that gets created, has the name of the parent team. So it's team name dash and then the name of the private channel, the name you named the private channel when you created it, right? So it's kind of connected here, and I will talk about how it's being connected or not connected here to the parent team. But you can see the URL, the team name dash the private channel name. And of course, there's a shared library here where the files that are you put in the private channel are stored in. And it will create a folder in this shared library with also the name of the private channel, and the files you put in the private channel will end up in this folder, right? So a few facts here when this happens. Basically, I told you this is a totally new site collection, and when that gets created, it uses a custom template called team channel #O. Okay, and you can use this kind of template to filter on this template when trying to find all the sites that get created with private channels, because you can't really find these sites that get created in the SharePoint Admin Center. If you go to the SharePoint Admin Center, you can see all the sites that get provisioned when you create a team, right? So you can go there and you see the settings and add additional restrictions to those sites as well when it comes to what you can do and not do regarding sharing and stuff like that. Those sites that get created with this special template, team channel #O, you can't see them at all. So you have to use other means to find them, which I will talk about in a minute. Totally new different site collection. So why is that? That is to make sure that if you're not, it's security. So if you're not an owner or member of this private channel, you're not supposed to be able to access any of the content within those. So of course you can do permissions on folder levels. I mean, I was telling you everything about files is in SharePoint, and you can go to SharePoint, you can break inheritance on permissions, you can, restrict a lot there. But the thing is, the owners of the team, they are site collection administrators, and they have a lot of access, and they can basically access anything. So that wouldn't really help. That wouldn't restrict the team owners for being able to access the content in private channels if they were to be created in that default team site that belongs to the parent team. So now a whole new different team site gets provisioned instead. So when it comes to permissions, nothing really is connected there, right? It's a whole new permission or a security structure there since the new team site, but it is in other ways connected to this parent team. So for example, when you create this private channel and this team site gets provisioned, it inherits the parent's team's, for example, classification, sensitivity labels, and other settings like guest settings as well. Some of these can be changed by the channel owner, but they're kind of it inherits these settings. There are some limitations to this. So for example, if you have a sensitivity label applied to the team, you create a private channel that will inherit this sensitivity label. And as I said, you can go in and change this as a channel owner, change this on this team site, but it won't be visible. This change won't be visible from the parent team. So if you go to the parent team site, it's if you go to the team from a team's perspective, go to the private channel, go into the private channel, it still states the sensitivity label of the parent team, not the one you changed to, unfortunately. But it will change it to the back end. So I mentioned here it's connected in several ways. One of those is that it inherits some settings, sensitivity labels, and so forth. Also, for example, if you delete the parent team, the channel still belongs to this team in one way or another. From a team's perspective, right? It's channel in this team. So if you delete the team, all the private channels will be deleted as well, along with all these team sites belonging to the private channels as well. They will also be deleted. The other way around as well. I mean, you can restore a channel. If you restore a channel, a private channel, it will be restored along with the team site where the files are and everything as well. Okay, so if you go into when it comes to working from other workloads, for example, if you go and into a SharePoint to a team site of a private channel, there's some limitations what you can actually do there when it comes to, for example, if you go into the team site of the private channel and delete that team site. Normally, when you do this in a team, that basically says, okay, we're going to delete the team site. That team site belongs to a group, so we're going to delete everything, right? So when we do this in a private channel, it will actually revert the change as long as the private channel still exists in Microsoft Teams. So if you go to SharePoint from a private channel, you can do this. There's a button right in Teams. You end up in the SharePoint team site, click delete that team site, and it will actually restore this as long as the private channel still lives in Teams. Another thing, kind of the same, is that if you, a team and a SharePoint team site basically uses two groups, the owner groups and the member group, right? And you can go in normally from SharePoint perspective, add members there, and they will be automatically added to the team because it's kind of like a group-based membership. So you can add members a little bit in different workloads. If you go into SharePoint of a private channel, a team site of a private channel, and use these two groups, the owners group and the members group, and add or remove members from there or users from there, it will be a job basically removing those changes. So you have to use Teams, go in from a Teams perspective to work with members and owners of this private channel. Okay, you can use that, or you can use Teams Admin Center because that still counts in this sense as a Teams perspective. But you can't go into SharePoint even because some people do like SharePoint a lot and they work from a SharePoint perspective a lot as well. So they kind of, okay, I'm going to add, I want some other user here to be able to just access the files of the private channel, for example. So if you do that and go into the members group of this private channel and add them as a member, just know that they will be removed from there within, I think it's like 3 hours or something like that. So what you can do instead is actually use other groups. You can still add other additional users to this team site or to have access to these channels, but then you have to use, for example, the visitors group or create other SharePoint groups as well and use them for permissions to these files. That's totally fine. But the owners group and the members group are kind of like, leave them alone and work from a Teams perspective. The same time when you want to delete a private channel, do that from Teams, nowhere else. Except from your IT administrator, you can use the Teams Admin Center or PowerShell or something like that, obviously. All right. So I was talking about, this is a totally different library and a different team site and stuff like that. And I hear this a lot from customers saying, okay, because it's very common that users synchronize Teams files. I mean, it works perfectly fine. You can synchronize files to their local computer by using the OneDrive client. And many users, they synchronize the whole library, like the root of the library belonging to the team. By doing so, you don't have to individually go and sync all the different channels, but they are automatically all synchronized. And if there is an additional new standard channel created, that will also synchronize by default because you sync the root of the library where the team channels or the channel folders will be created in SharePoint. So that's very common you do that. But since private channels doesn't live in that library at all, they're in a totally different library somewhere else. I hear that people are like, okay, I synchronize all the files, but now I don't see any of the private channels in there. They won't, because they have to individually go into every private channel you want to synchronize and click the synchronize button from there in order to synchronize the files of the private channel. So for every new channel that gets created, if someone wants to synchronize those files, obviously if they're a member of the private channel, they have to go into there, or it works from SharePoint perspective as well, but it doesn't matter. You can do it straight from Teams as well. So just keep that in mind as well. You have to do that. Right. So I have an additional demo here from this kind of SharePoint perspective. All right. So let's go to this private channel here, and let's go to the little ellipses here at the right and go to opening SharePoint. So let's open this up in SharePoint. And you can see here now the name of this, and also as well as the URL. My team is called or named CloudEight, right? And you can also see that the name of this team site is CloudEight dash the name of the private channels. In this case, I chose the manager's private channel, and the URL up here you can see as well. And in this library here, you can see there's a folder called the name of the private channels. One thing to keep in mind here is that when you're moving files, for example, to this private channel, I've heard users saying, I can see my files, because it can get a bit complex when you try to move it, because you have the team site, like the team where it belongs, and that's called CloudEight, and then you gonna put the files in the private channel, which are then the name of the private channels, right? So CloudEight and then managers, and then again you're gonna put them in this folder called managers, right? And then you can actually see them like they will be put in this in the correct place, so they will end up also you can see that they will be visible in Teams, right? So if you, for example, forget that and they will be put in this root, they won't be visible in Teams, because this is the folder the files tab points to, right? So keep that in mind. As you said about like there's connections in some way, you can see here there's in the left rail, there's an icon I call parent team. So it recognizes this, and this is part of kind of this custom template, right? It recognizes this as a private channel. It's with this custom template. So you can click here to be taken to the parent team site here as well. And you can see here, here's the other standard channel folders in SharePoint. So if you go in here, go back to the private channel team site, we can go to the cogwheel here, let's click library settings here, and then permissions for this document library. You can see here is now unfortunately it's a little bit mixed here, it's actually Swedish, but it says here there are three groups: the visitors group, the owners, the members group, and the owners group. So if I go in here to the members group of here, and you can see I added Emma here, so she's a member here. If I remove her here, for example, or add another user, those changes will revert back to what they were from the beginning. So if I want to remove Emma, I'd go from the team's perspective and remove her from there. And obviously you can use the visitors group here to add managers, and you can change the permissions levels of this group. You can also create an additional group here in order for you, if you want to give other users permissions to these files in this team site. So let's just quickly go back to Teams here, go to the files, and if anyone creates this private channel and you want to synchronize those files, Obviously, you have to be a member or owner first. You can go into the Files tab and just click Synchronize here as well. And that will now synchronize separately from the other library, team library. It will synchronize these private channel files as well. All right, let's go back to our. So, talking about how can this affect this kind of like it lives in a different place? What do we need to think about from a security and compliance or even governance perspective here? For example, if you have a retention policy applied to your teams, or basically maybe the files of your teams in this case, when you create private channels in this team, you have a retention policy for, those won't be covered by that policy, okay? So what you need to do basically is change the policy to also include or add another policy to also include the private channels. So if you see here in the compliance security center here, when you're gonna applying a retention on files for teams, you use the Microsoft 365 group options here. And in this case, it says all groups. I want the retention on all groups, basically all teams in this case. And I have been telling you about, you know, the team is based on a Microsoft 365 group. So it makes sense. So in this case here, obviously you can filter, but in this case, all teams are covered by this retention policy, all files in all my teams, except from the private channels. Since the private channels, the teams that get provisioned, they're not connected to this group, right? I've been mentioning this a couple of times already. So what do you need to do? You need to change the setting here or add another setting here. For example, in this case here, SharePoint sites, because SharePoint sites basically covers all other SharePoint sites that don't belong to Microsoft 365 group. So if I put all sites here the same as with Microsoft 365 group, I make sure I also include all the private channel files as well in this setup. So think about that. You have to edit any retention policy. You have to also include the private channel files. Okay. So when it comes to conversations, right? We have the post pane both in the standard channel and in a private channel, and we can have retention policies for channel conversations as well. And as I mentioned, there's a group mailbox belonging to a team, right? So how it works is that a copy for compliance reasons gets copied to this group mailbox. All channel conversations, there's a compliance copy copied to this group mailbox. So you can put, basically that's when you, for example, do e-discovery, you put that mailbox in there. If you want to do some sort of, for example, retention policies, it works like it copies, it takes those copies from that group mailbox and utilizes that group mailbox for this purposes. So because a private channel is kind of disconnected from this group, it doesn't belong in this group from this group, like in this perspective, so they can't really utilize this group mailbox. So in order, for example, to do e-discovery and stuff like that and put messages on hold, you use the users mailboxes. So the private channel members, when there is a channel conversation, a post happening, that compliance copy gets copied over to all the members' user mailboxes. Okay, so that's the difference. It utilizes the personal mailboxes of the members of the private channel. So what does this really mean? So for example, to perform an e-discovery search against private channel messages, you need to include at least one of the private channel members' user mailbox. Okay, so that's where you're going. You're not using the group mailbox in this scenario. So to put retain messages, to put messages on hold or something like that is a user mailboxes here as well you're utilizing. So another side limitation here is that you can have retention policies on channel conversations and obviously team chats and stuff like that as well. But when it comes to conversations in a private channel, retention policies for these are not available today. Okay, so you can't have retention, and that's another important part when really like figuring out like how are we going to utilize private channels. Can we really do it from a security perspective, because we have a policy saying we need retention for all chats, for example, or channel conversations. So private channels not available. When it comes to IT administration, like how can we manage private channels from an IT administrator perspective, like a global administrator, a Teams administrator, or so forth, you can utilize a Teams admin center to do this. And as well as like managing Teams overall, you can as well manage private channels here. I was mentioning that the sites for a private channel aren't visible in the SharePoint admin center. They are visible in the Teams admin center. You can see and work with them there as well. So what you can do is basically you can view team and all its channel, including the private channels that you can see on the image here as well on the right. You can create additional private channels. You can as well delete them. You can edit them, not much. You can change the name there and description, for example. And you can as well add and remove members and promoting to owners and vice versa. That's what you can do here. So we can work with private channels this way. We can also do this programmatically by using the Graph API. There, for example, we can create private channels on behalf of a team owner. We can list all the private channel messages and replies with the Microsoft Graph. We can here as well list all the SharePoint URLs of private channels for a particular team or all teams. And we can list and update roles, membership roles here from here as well. PowerShell is also really easy to work with private channels with the Microsoft Teams PowerShell module, for example. And here you can also create private channels. You can list all the private channels. You can edit and so forth, as well as working with memberships of private channels. And for example, here there is a parameter, a special parameter called a membership type, which you can use to filter out the private channels of a certain team. So, for example, you can use the command like get teams channel, and then use this parameter membership type and set that value to private. And in this case, in this command here, we can see it will actually list all the private channels of this particular team. You can also, as I said, you can't see these sites in the SharePoint admin center, but it's really easy to actually filter on this certain custom template called, as you remember, maybe a team channel #O. You can use that. For example, you can write get SBO site and then filter on this template and then write the name of this template, and it will list all the team channel sites. For example, if you want that to see how many private channels do we have here, or how many sites I guess provision, maybe you want to have use them for applying retention policies on the files here for not all of them. That's easy to put that setting as I was showing previously, but on some of them you can get a list very easily from here as well. We have an additional final demo here. I'm just going to show you from the Teams admin center perspective here how it looks. So let's see here. Here we go. And I love this. It's the best. You can see we're running out a little bit of time here, so I'll try to speed up a bit as well. If you go to Teams here in the Teams admin center as an IT administrator or Teams administrator, you can see here Teams policies. And you can say here, there's one that I created already, but the one that is there by default is the global one. And you can see here, it's not much you can do here. It's basically enabling or disabling private channels. It's enabled by the default. But if I want to disable this for everyone and only utilize this global policy, I can just turn this to off. Let's just revert it back to on. Here I created an additional policy, and I can maybe have this on and the global off if I just want to have a subset of users in my organization to be able to create channels. So I can work with this with different kinds of policies and then apply a policy to individual users. And for example, you can also use the group policy assignment here as well. to assign these policies to certain security groups or that I've maybe synchronized from my on-premises Active Directory or something like that. So I can add a group here, and as you can see here as well, I've added a security group here called Create Private Channels, and they are assigned the allow private channel creation. So the members of this group and only them can create private channels, for example. So that's how you can basically work with that. So if I go to manage teams here and I go find my team I've been working with, the CloudEight team, I go into that team and go to the channel tab over here. And I click there and I can now see all the channels, including the private one. As you can see here, I have 2 private channels in this case. So I can highlight those and I can edit those. I was saying you can change the name of the private channel and the description. That's all you can do here. I can also delete them if I want to. I can add an additional private channel here. You see when I create a channel, I can choose private here. And I can also further click into the private channels themselves. So if I go into the manager here, and I can see the members and what role they have, and I can change the roles of these members or owners. I can also add members here to these private channels as well. So it's really easy to work with from a Teams admin perspective, and as I said, I mean, even from a PowerShell perspective or graph, it's pretty simple to manage them in many cases. All right, so I'm gonna finish up this session here. So this one. So a summary here from this session is try to think about all these kind of perspectives before you just like let everyone create the private channels, because it's kind of like letting loose Teams creation, because it will create additional workloads. It will create site collections. Microsoft raised the allowed limit you can create an organization from 500,000 site collections to 2 million site collections, just very much because when they released private channels, they knew that these would start to create additional site collections, right? But make sure you kind of have this overview of, you know, how it works. Are we using retention policies? Who are going to be able to create private channels? Everyone or just a subset of users? Make sure they know they have kind of a responsibility as well, because now we have another set of owners. Many have these kind of policies where it says, like, when you're an owner of a team, you have some kind of responsibility of the content within the team and who are the members of the team. And the kind of the same applies to on a channel level for private channels. They also have this responsibility of the content and members of that particular channel, right? So and also maybe define some use cases. When are we utilizing this? I was talking about in the beginning, like, you can do it all wrong and they can be basically worthless if you don't think about, are we creating them from the beginning and so forth, because you can't convert them when they are created. Then you have to start over, and moving conversation and such is not easy. So be aware of these and the limitations, and plan for the compliance and security gotchas I was thinking about in this session. And of course, when it comes like to everything, make sure to educate your users about how they're going to manage this, about the ownership and membership, and they actually have some sort of responsibility, and when and how they're going to be used is always very important.